Hi everybody. We're going to take a look at a new strategy I've been working on for Axis and Allies 1914. But really quick, before we get into that, I recently had a commenter ask, they're thinking about getting 1914, but they heard that it is a bit sparse on units, and that is definitely true. And they asked what recommendations I would have about accessory units to get along with the game. It's always good to have some additional units, but the areas that I have seen flawed the most in that regard are in terms of German infantry. In fact, Germany has just enough infantry to have one everywhere and then chips under it to start the game. So if you decide you want to buy infantry on the first turn, and assuming you haven't lost any, which you probably wouldn't at that point, you just have to remember, hey, this stack of chips represents infantry. So that's kind of a hassle. So getting extra German infantry is good. And also, there are not enough red chips, specifically the dark red chips. So maybe an extra chip set, especially of that color, would be a good move. I've heard of people running into issues with British infantry. That doesn't happen quite as often. As with Germany, being the very first turn of the game, where the Central Powers on the first setup, they have exactly the number of dark red chips needed, and not a single to spare, unless you really start stacking the light red chips, where you otherwise would want to use a dark red chip. So those would be the first two areas, and then maybe get some extra infantry as England as a third option, but definitely those first two. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. This is a new strategy I've been working on. I did not get a chance to try it at Gen Con because I played one game as the Allies, and this is a Central Powers strategy. So this will also be a little bit more specific and detailed than some of my other videos. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first country to go is Austria-Hungary. And I've already divided my forces up somewhat, so I'm going to send 9 infantry, 2 artillery to Serbia. I'm going to send that number because with a statistically probable roll, I should be able to take out the Serbs, taking 2 casualties, and then my army here will be freed up to do something on turn 2. Either move this way or deal with Albania, or hopefully I don't have to deal with something up here, but it's freed up if necessary. The Serbs are going to have 4 units defending at 3, so on average 2 of them should hit, so we'll just remove 2 chips from there. May not do that in every battle, but just that's basically how I try and calculate what casualties I'll take and what casualties I will cause in when I'm working strategy. Now the other attack we're going to do, of course, is Venice. Now you've seen in some other videos that a lot of the time I like to jump over and attack Tuscany and take Tuscany. We are not going to do that in this case, and it'll become clear why here in a little bit. But for now, we're just going to attack Venice. And let's see, they've got 5, 6, 7, 8. They have 8 guys defending at 3, so they should hit 4. And I will have, let's see, 4 artillery, so that's 8 threes. So that's 4 units, and then 8 more infantry, 5, 6. I should hit between 6 and 7 guys, and they should hit about 4. So, let's see. Yeah, I don't want this video to be putting on and removing a bunch of chips. So, we'll just remember that they've taken very heavy casualties. I've taken some, but the bulk of my force is still here. That territory is contested. Now, the rest we're going to do on Austria's turn. This is going to be an all-or-nothing strategy. So, if it works, we're going to be in awesome shape. We're going to pull out all the stops to make it work. If it flounders, we're in trouble. So, what we're going to do, we are going to leave 9 infantry, so stack of 6, stack of 3, up here to defend against Russia. Everything else is going to come down here. It's going to come down here for a couple reasons. One of which is if France takes Albania, and Italy has troops on its turn. Now it can't march up here, and it's sealed in on the Serbia side. The other reason is that we want as many units as possible to move into Venice next turn. We want to clear that out no matter what Italy does. Now, I've been toying around with possibly sending some of the units up here, so I might think about that a little bit more, but we want to make sure that if Italy attacks from here with its 4 guys, that they're more than likely going to lose all 4 of them. We don't even want this to be contested on our second turn. And then, of course, Austria is going to put its new units here in Vienna. And let's see, how can I signify that? I'm just going to put a single red ship there to distinguish that. That way I'm not digging through the boxes. That's going to be the standard Austrian purchase, a fighter, and then a mix of artillery and infantry. Then we're going to have Russia. Russia is going to see this and think, oh my gosh, Austria is pulling back. Maybe it tries to go on the offensive. Our 9 infantry here should keep this territory contested even if both Poland and Ukraine attack. Should that happen, that might help Germany. Germany might be able to come in, or it could counterattack down here if necessary. We just want as many as we need and no more to keep this territory contested should Russia try to attack with everything it has. More than likely, at least in my view, Russia's probably going to consolidate on its first turn because it has a lot of units way back here. It's going to want to push them all to the front, and it's probably going to make its move on its second turn, which is fine. And that might not happen in your game, but that's what I suspect. So now it's Germany's turn. Germany is going to do its normal thing where it's going to move here. Now I'm actually going to modify this slightly. I want some more offense down here in Switzerland. So I'm going to move these artillery down that way. And I've been working on what I think is the proper balance. For video purposes, it's easier just to move one stack one way and one the other way. So I'm not necessarily going to count. And then these guys in Munich are going to come down here. I'm probably going to take 1 casualty from Switzerland because they've got 2 guys defending at 3. One of them should hit. So these guys are down here. And then everybody who can reach Alsace is going to come down here and defend that. And then, let's see, what are we going to do about the rest of Germany? So the rest of Germany's units, again, we're going heavily after France. And you'll see what the results could be towards the end of this video. Let me zoom out. Oh, I'm zoomed out as far as I can be. All right, anyway, so we're going to move Berlin's units down to Munich. Now, why Munich? Well, from here, if Russia has any nasty ideas about hitting Galicia or Silesia, we are as long as we're still contesting it, and that's a reason it's important to contest, this force can be diverted this way if necessary. Excuse me. It is also configured to move on this road if necessary. It won't be able to contest anything quite yet, but we definitely want it to be in a position where it can do some damage over here. Our fighter, moving 2 spaces from Munich, can hit, let's see, it'll be able to hit Lorraine or Burgundy from its current position, and Burgundy is going to be critical. I've toyed around with maybe sending 1 infantry from Berlin over to Ruhr, and then the fighter can hit Picardy and Lorraine. Lorraine is probably going to be the least valuable in this case, followed by Picardy, and then Burgundy is the most important. If we could position the fighter in such a place that on turn 2 it could hit both Picardy and Burgundy, that would be ideal, because then France might not be tipped off as to which flank is going to be more important. But coming from Berlin, there is no location that I see that is going to be that we could put it at the end of our first turn that would be able to hit both of those territories. So I'm going to go with Munich. That way it's in range of the more important location. We are also going to take these artillery. We're going to move them down to Munich as well. Again, all or nothing strategy. And then I've been toying around with, well, what's the best way to fend off Russia? Because this strategy is all about just slowing them down long enough for everything over here to take place. Our goal is going to be taking Paris and taking Rome and ending the game as quickly as possible. So we're looking, hopefully, and again, don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but looking at possibly a turn 4 or a turn 5. If we can't do it in 5 turns, this is not going to work. So I've been thinking about different ways to do this. Right now, what I'm thinking might be beneficial is to consolidate them into one spot. So if Russia attacks either here or here, it's going to be contested, and then the other side can swing up, or swing that way to help defend. Or if Russia moves in here, then on its turn 2, Germany can move in, and Austria can still move in. Sorry about that camera. Austria can still move in to Prussia. So that's where I'm at right now on that front. But there might be a better way to do it. And then, of course, Germany places its new units here, and we will just signify them with that. And that's going to be, in my view, either a fighter and a bunch of infantry, or just a bunch of infantry. Now, if you have an odd dollar, buy an extra artillery instead of an infantry. Spend all your money. But you're going to want your forces in Berlin that you place on your first turn and every turn thereafter are basically going to be going, you're going to be going this way to try and slow the Russians down. So the more units you can place there for the lowest cost, that's going to be ideal. And I mentioned the fighter because Russia probably is going to have built a fighter, and you'll at least want parity over there. Now, I didn't set up the German Navy or the British Navy, but it's going to be key that you destroy their Navy here, and if possible, their Navy over here as well. Because we don't want England funneling units into France, or at least we want to slow them down as much as possible. So taking out their Navy the first turn, and maybe with what remains of our fleet, destroying their fleet the second turn if they just immediately try and build stuff, that's going to be incredibly important for us. So after this, France is going to do some stuff. It's going to start moving its guys forward. I'm not going to simulate that. We just need to know that they're going to have, in some combination, guys in Picardy, Lorraine, and Burgundy, and then there are new units in Paris. There's no reason for them to have guys anywhere else here on the continent. We just don't know what combination they're going to be in. And I'll talk a little bit later about what I would do and how I think this strategy that I'm showing you might be stopped. So Italy is going to be able to push all of its guys up here if it chooses to do so. If it does, then that means Piedmont's open, and that's fine for us. It is not probably going to be able to take out our all of our Austrian units, and France doesn't have a reason to move into Tuscany and drop off a couple infantry there, which is good for Austria's second turn. So in Austria's second turn, whatever it has in Serbia, whatever it has up here, needs to be used to fend off Russia. And everything that it builds starting this turn is going to be also devoted to that cause. What we built last turn, so on our turn 1, we are going to need to use over here. So what we're going to end up doing is all of these forces that we have here will end up, except for an infantry and artillery, or maybe 2 infantry, are going to move into here. And let's just simulate this. We're going to say that Italy moved everybody up, and then Italy has new guys in Rome. So all these guys are going to move into Venice, except the 2. We're going to take this opportunity, our turn 2, to jump over. Sorry, this is getting kind of messy. To jump over into Tuscany. We're going to take that for free. No French units to worry about. Italy zoomed everybody up to Venice, so nobody defending it. We're going to take that for free. We're going to more than likely take Venice itself, Worst case scenario, it's contested, but we have a good chance of taking it with our massive troops. And we're also going to move our guys from Vienna over to Switzerland. That's going to become important here in a little bit. And then, like I said, we put new units down in Venice, and whatever is in Serbia, we're going to use that to deal with Albania and Romania, and we're going to have to rely on help from Germany to deal with this developing situation here, because Russia on its second turn is more than likely going to make its move. So that's all happening. Russia's going to do its thing. Turn 2, it's going to attack more than likely, and it may or may not break through the front. And we're just going to have to use what forces we have to deal with it. Like I said, every unit that we build starting on Austria's second turn is going to be devoted here. Every unit that we build as Germany, starting with Germany's first turn, so its first build, it goes down at the end of the first turn, we can use it the second turn, is going to be devoted over here. We're going to need everything to deal with Russia. But we're going to want to pounce on any mistake that they make. Now, if England sees we're going after France, they're going to be devoting heavily over here. That means the Ottomans probably are not going to be pressed as hard. There are a lot of units down here. The first turn or maybe 2, they are still probably going to be pressed, but then they're not going to have the continual influx from India. They can put some pressure on Russia as well, and we're going to need that as the Central Powers, because they're going to be very weak over here. Anyway, so we've got that. Now it's Germany's turn. I'm going to leave this side of the board alone for now. In fact, I'm just going to move these guys away. We know what's going on over there. Or we know what we have to do over there anyway. So over here, Germany is going to move somebody into Piedmont. Maybe one guy, maybe more, depending on what's in Burgundy. And then, so this is Germany's turn 2. Germany's going to move from Belgium to Picardy, Alsace to Lorraine, and this mass of units that I think got jumbled is going to go into Burgundy. Basically, we are going to contest these 3 territories: Burgundy, Lorraine, and Picardy. And also, with the help of Austria, we are contesting or controlling, hopefully controlling, Venice and Piedmont and Tuscany. And we do have these guys here in Munich. We can send some of them back this way. We can also send some of them to... Sorry, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time with the camera angle today. We can also send some of them down into Venice if we need to free that up, because it's going to be critical that the Austrians are able to double move these forces on their turn 3. So that's what we're going to do as Germany. Munich could go different directions, so I'll just describe that. Plus, these stacks are getting kinda crazy. But that's what we're going to do with Munich. Burgundy is critical to our success. Now, France is going to do its thing. Italy is, guess what? Italy is in economic collapse right now. Italy doesn't get to build anything on its turn. So Italy is probably going to come up here. It's going to take Tuscany back. That's all it's going to be able to do. It can't build anything on its turn. So then we're going to go around the turns, and now we're back at Austria again. Austria has units freed up in Venice. France more than likely contested Burgundy. So what we're going to do as Austria, we're going to send some forces down here. Remember, Italy doesn't start with much production anyway, so whatever it built its first turn got moved up to Tuscany, and everything up here has already been wiped out by the Austrians and Germans. So what we need to, and they can't build anything, so they've got nothing back in Rome. So what we're going to do on Austria turn 3, we're going to move enough units to wipe out Tuscany, and then we'll just start rolling that way. So that's turn... let's see. Italy turn 2 is an economic collapse. Austria turn... but it takes Tuscany back. Austria turn 3 is going to take Tuscany again, meaning the Italians on their turn 3 will be an economic collapse again, and we're just going to start marching down. France is going to have to devote something over here. England might, but England's probably going to be tied up trying to help here, or if they haven't didn't notice the first 2 turns and they're over here, then that's all the better. But Italy's in a lot of trouble, and then we're going to take whatever we don't need for Italy. That whole Austrian force is going to come in, possibly clear out Burgundy. If we can clear out Burgundy, that is fantastic for us. Now the Germans contest it, and this is based on that double move. You can move into any territory that's contested, rather than what I usually play by, which is any territory you contest. The clarified tournament rules are what kind of spurred this strategy. So we've got this massive Austrian forces, minus a handful going to Tuscany, are going to sweep in here. You're going to have Germans and Austrians in Burgundy. If you can clear out Burgundy, you are golden. And the reason is, so after Austria, Russia's going to do whatever Russia does. Now we've got Germany. If Germany's clear in Burgundy, we're contesting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Germans are going to move from Burgundy into Bordeaux, and depending on what's happening, they could move from Piedmont to Marseille, or they could move down from Burgundy into Marseille. So that is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're definitely in economic collapse at that point. I don't recall. That might be political collapse. I'd have to double check. I should have looked at that before coming over here. But I know 8 is economic. They're definitely in economic. If Piedmont is open, if Piedmont is German troops up here are free. They could also hit Brest. I doubt that both Burgundy and Piedmont are going to be open on the same turn, but if they do, then basically every single French territory can be contested on Germany's third turn. If the force in Burgundy is sufficiently strong and Paris is kind of weak, you could even contest Paris itself. That is kind of a pie in the sky. It's unlikely you'll be able to do all of that. The key, like I said, is taking out Burgundy, because then you can hit both of these, and France is definitely in economic collapse. So then we'll say that France counterattacks on its turn 3. It takes back 1 or 2 territories, but it couldn't build anything. And this also, don't forget about this force in Lorraine, has nowhere to go because it's behind 2 territories you're contesting. You can use that to free up on Germany's turn 4, Picardy or Burgundy, if France happened to counterattack in either one. And you have Austria. So France will go, it'll counterattack, and then Austria will get its turn with its massive units to clear out, can opener, whatever you will, or just attack territories France is contesting, clear them out, and the German forces can move forward. So that is a German turn 3, which means by France's turn 4, it could potentially be in economic. It'll probably be an economic. Well, I shouldn't say that. It could be an economic collapse. Probably won't be in political collapse because it'll be able to counterattack. But then with these huge masses of forces over here, both Germany and Austria, so France, economic collapse turn 3, it counterattacks. Potentially turn 4, it might be too weak to effectively counter and get out of political collapse. So you could have Paris turn 4. Coming over here to Italy, remember it was Italy's turn 2, we took Tuscany, and so they're in economic collapse. They take it back on their turn 2. Austria, on Austria's turn 3, takes this. Not a whole lot of forces down here. Austria turn 4, moves to Rome, the same turn that France is in economic collapse. I'm sorry, the same turn that France is potentially in economic collapse. And so you've got 4 rounds, and you've got potentially Rome and France in France in political collapse, which means that you have Paris. You just move into Paris. So maybe you move in on turn 5 if you're not already contesting Paris on your turn 4. And that allows for minimal time for the U.S. to get into the war, minimal time for the Russians to really steamroll and get over here. Because like I said, if we do not fulfill this very strict timetable and Russia is able to move in, we could be in a lot of trouble. This has got to work, and it's got to work fast if we want any chance of success. Now, how I would defend against this, if Italy falls, there's not a ton we can do about it. The key to this is going to be in France, and it's going to be in Burgundy. And so it's going to be important that if the Allies see this coming, England immediately starts devoting resources up here. I know that it sucks you can't take out the Ottomans, and Russia is going to be in trouble as far as that goes, but Russia is going to be on much more solid footing over here than it normally is, so Russia will probably be okay. And it's going to take you a couple turns to build up your surface fleet, clear out the German Navy, and start getting troops across. So you've got to start that as soon as possible. Also, I would see what kind of forces the Germans have in Picardy. Recognize that I just need to make sure that they have to... Lorraine really doesn't matter. I mean, yes, it matters, it's worth a couple of production, but the Germans are going to have to move in here and stop anyway. And I could either leave enough forces there to try and contest it, but if that happens at the cost of letting them through Burgundy and or Picardy, they're just going to fan out over here. Lorraine really isn't that important. What I would do to deal with this strategy is devote just enough forces up into Picardy to prevent the Germans from breaking through, keep it contested, put everything else that I can into Burgundy, so that when the Germans attack, they take heavy casualties, and hopefully when the Austrians attack, they are not able to break through, or not able to kill all the French forces, which means Germany will have to, instead of its turn 3 fanning out, it's going to need its turn 3 just to break through. And then I've got more French troops here I can move in. I'm setting their timetable back by a turn or two, and with a timetable like this, a turn or two means Russia kicking down the door of Berlin and or Vienna. And the difference between masses of American troops landing in France, more British troops coming in. So France on its own without help, no matter what, is probably going to be in a lot of trouble, but really, they just need to delay this by a turn or two. A lot of it's going to come down to rolling. When I've done my simulations, I've looked at the statistically probable rolls. But Germany could have much better rolls. It could also have much worse rolls. So you never really know. They say no strategy survives its first encounter with the enemy, and I think that's true. But this is how I would go about doing it, and I haven't play tested this, but kind of looking at scenarios, this looks pretty potent, so long as the Allies don't read it properly and adjust accordingly. Oh, and one thing I think I forgot to mention, well, I kind of mentioned it, but this fighter, of course, on Germany's turn 2, is going to come into Burgundy. And then a lot will also ride on that, because we're going to have quite a few artillery down there, not our entire arsenal, but quite a few artillery down there. And if we do get air superiority, that's going to help us tremendously. The Austrians, on their turn 1, also built a fighter here. The closest it can get is Switzerland on its turn 2, but on their turn 3, when they're trying to shore up Burgundy, they can move the fighter in there. If Germany already has air supremacy, Germany's second turn, they could send the fighter down here if they want to, just depending on how things look. So just to recap, we are going to be devoting as few resources as possible over here. Everything else is going this way. Turn 1, Austria is going to attack Venice hard. That's it. Germany is going to Belgium and Switzerland. Turn 2, or round 2, Austria is going to hopefully take out Venice completely and move into Tuscany and move guys into Switzerland if necessary while defending over here. Germany is going to, on its turn 2, hit Picardy, Lorraine, and Burgundy, all 3 on that turn. On Austria's turn 3, it's going to take Tuscany back Italians are probably would have taken it. They were in economic collapse on their turn 2. So Austria's turn 3, we take Tuscany back. We move into Burgundy to try and free up the German troops to fan out into France. Germany turn 3. We hope that we can fan into France because this strategy largely hinges on that. We fan out as much as possible into Marseille, Bordeaux, possibly into Brest, as many of those as possible. And we let the Austrian troops defend Burgundy. So Germany's turn 3, that's Germany's turn 3. France turn 3 is an economic collapse, so it just tries to counter. Italy is in its second round of economic collapse, so it's in a lot of trouble. And then Austria turn 4, it's going to continue moving down the Italian boot and doing whatever is necessary over here to make sure German units can continue to move. Germany turn, let's see, that's Germany turn 4 is going to continue fanning out, try and contest Paris. Hopefully by the end of France's turn 4, it's in political collapse, as is Italy, which means they both fall. We're going to have Rome as the central powers, so we've got that. If we're contesting Paris, and England and the U.S. aren't able to counterattack and get it back, then France will win basically at the end of the U.S.'s turn. If they are able to counterattack, we have a ton of forces here. We just need to, on our turn 5, push everything into Paris so that it is in our hands at the end of the 5th turn, and then we've won the game. So that's what I've been working on. There are a few things that I do want to fine-tune. Some things that I've already mentioned in this video. Some things that I'm not really going to feel solid on until I've play-tested this in a real game, not just simulated a few times. But I wanted to get this out here for you guys to see, recognizing that we are in peril as the Central Powers over here. But if we're talking about victory by the 4th turn, potentially, and certainly economic collapse from these two countries by the 3rd turn, if all goes well, we don't have to deal with more forces. But if we can get to political collapse or winning the game turn 4, at most turn 5, is that fast enough? So let me know what you guys think. If there are revisions that you think, hey, just adjust this slightly or that slightly, please let me know. Or any major flaws aside from, the obvious Russia and the obvious, if the U.S. and England start getting massive forces over here, we're doomed sort of issues, which are obvious. Anything else, definitely let me know, and let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.